of course, on such a day, we want to hear more of the details, those that remember the lifetime and interactions, personal interactions with Rebbetzin Chana. So we're going to open up first with going to a special family of Kohanim, the Friedman family, who actually lived in the same apartment building as Rebbetzin Chana, and therefore thereby automatically had interactions with her. And without further ado, we'll go to the oldest of the brothers, very, very well known and sought after speaker, and all ears are upon him, Rabbi Manis Friedman.
I was hoping you'd leave me to the end. We grew up next door to the Rebbitson. The Rebbitson lived on President Street in the apartment building 1418. We lived on the corner right next door in the apartment building 1414. Today, those two apartment buildings are the dormitory for the Bachim. So it retained its kedusha. The Rebbitson would often, on the warmer, nicer days, she would stroll, take a little walk in front of the building on President Street and then around the corner on Kingston Avenue. I was terrified. I was a bar mitzvah boy, and the Rebbitson was as scary as the Rebbe. To think of approaching her or was frightening. In fact, seeing how the Chassidim, who knew her back from Russia and so on, seeing how they were uncomfortable in her presence because of their respect for her. That told me that this is not somebody to take lightly. There were some Chassidim who lived also in 1418. Hendel Lieberman lived there. Getzel Rabashkin, I believe, lived there. Zalman Teibels lived there. And the way they treated the Rebbitson told you everything you needed to know. But I do have one anecdote. The Rebbitson was strolling in front of her apartment, and she related this incident. She said there were some Beis Yaakov girls walking down the street, and she overheard their conversation. One of them said, "You think it's going to rain tomorrow?" And this was Erev Sukkos. And the other one said, "No." So the first one asked, why do you think it's not going to rain? She said, because the Lubavitcher Rebbe sends people out with the lulav and the esrog and miftzah sukkah, so it's not going to rain because his shluchim are going to be in the street. And the Rebbitson hears this, and of course, it gives her great nachas. One other occasion, when I was coming home from 770, the Rebbitson was on Kingston Avenue, and there was a woman speaking to her rather loudly. The woman was not dressed in the most sneeze fashion, but she was speaking loudly, so I walked over behind the woman to see what's going on. The Rebbitson looked over this woman's shoulder at me, looked me straight in the eye, and like motioned like, "Shah, be quiet." The woman was saying, and I heard it very clearly, the woman was saying, "There's a great rabbi that lives here. I would love to see him and get his advice. Of course, I wouldn't come dressed like this." And the Rebbitson was beaming. So I just minded my own business and continued going. The thing that we see, it was not that much, it wasn't that many years after the Rebbitson arrived We're talking in the 50s now, early 60s. If you take a look at the picture of the Rebbitson sitting by the table when the Rebbe was in France to accompany her to New York, you see all the pain, all the torture. It's right there on her face. And then you look at the picture of the Rebbitson a few years later. There are many, many sitting by a Neshei Chabad convention, by Lag BaOmer parade. The difference is unbelievable. The Rebbitson is herself. Regal, calm, healthy looking. What a change. So the Rebbe's care, the Rebbe's attention, the Rebbe's was life-saving. Every day the Rebbe came to see her. Every day of the year, without fail. And we would be playing outside in front of the house, stickball, punchball, whatever it was, and we would have one eye open or one eye out for the Rebbitson, for the Rebbe's car, the Rebbe's wife, Rebbitson Chayamushka, who would drive the Rebbe to his visit with his mother. And I'm sure my brothers can tell you the story that the Rebbitson asked my mother to tell us not to open the door for the Rebbe, because the apartment building had this heavy metal and glass door. It was a two-hand job. You had to push really hard with both hands to get the door open. So we would open the door for the Rebbe and hold it for him. And the Rebbitson asked my mother to tell us not to do it because it's the only exercise the Rebbe got. And one final thought on the subject. We were wondering, what does the Rebbe do when he comes to visit? It was usually about a 20-minute visit. So we found out that in the summer, the Rebbe draws the drapes. And in the winter, the Rebbe serves tea. There was one chassid who was visiting with the Rebbitson. Anyway, I'm sure the story has many versions, but this is how we heard it at the time. One chassid was visiting with the Rebbetzin Chana, and the Rebbe walked in. So, of course, the normal procedure is when the Rebbe comes to visit, whoever was visiting would leave. This guy decided that he wants to, until he's asked to leave, he's not leaving. He was not asked to leave. The thing that he saw was that when the Rebbe got up to leave, after they were sitting at the dining room table, when the Rebbe got up to leave, he walked along the side of the table, straightening each chair as he walked out. Chassid was curious about that. So when the Rebbe had left, the Rebbitson said to him, noticing his curiosity, since his bar mitzvah, Rebbitson said, since his bar mitzvah, he is careful never to turn his back on me. He thinks I don't know, so don't tell him. But that's why when he walks out, he walks sideways, making believe like he's straightening out the chairs because he doesn't want to turn his back on his mother.
Recording in progress.
Now we'll hear from other people and maybe I'll remember some more stories.
very much. I guess from Rabbi Manis, we will go to Rabbi Shlomo Friedman. Rabbi Shlomo Friedman, you're on, I think. Your mic should be on.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Very good.
Loud and
Very
clear.
good. Actually, Manis, I remember opening the door for the Rebbe when the Rebbe would come, and I don't remember ever stopping. So even as a little boy, I wasn't listening to what I was supposed to.
Hasidim folgen nicht.
At any rate, what I remember of the Rebbitson also is that when she would stand in front of her building during the summer days when the weather was nice, just her standing there was so real. It was like, even as a child, you realize this is not your ordinary tenant in the building. Anyway, so my father, which was Zaisha Chesed, and he would see the Rebbitson standing there, and it always bothered him that she was standing. Why couldn't she sit? Now, in front of the two buildings at that time, the two gardens, the super would be very careful that nobody touches his garden. He took care of it. He manicured it. He cut the grass. He took care of the hedges. And if he would catch a kid in that garden, that would be the end. But anyway, so my father thought maybe the Rebbitson would like to sit when she's outside. She would stand for a long time sometimes. So he decided he's going to go to the super and ask for permission to build a bench for her in the garden. And very politely and with a big smile, he bumped into the super and he said, I would like to build a bench for Mrs. Schneerson. And he said, the Rebbe's mother, I give permission. And the next day, there was a nice big green bench waiting for the Rebbitson, and she used it many, many times. I remember that story. And then I remember maybe 35 years ago, my mother told me that when Michael Raskin, should live and be well, opened the fruit store. So he said to her, she said to him rather, that if you want to have a lot of customers and be successful, sollen die Politzes allemal sein volle. The shelves should always be full. If you'll keep the shelves full, you'll do well. And Baruch Hashem, the rest is history. So those are the two stories that I remember. And of course, all the singing that Avramel did, I'll leave that for Avramel to tell. And many other stories that he has to share.
I heard that story about the shelves, that the Rebbitson said it in the name of the Rebbe.
Oh, really?
It was a message from the Rebbe that when the shelves are full, customers are more attracted. It was right across the street, on the same corner, but across the street. Kingston and President, the fruit store.
We're telling stories here, but yeah, that's could be used as a actionable item of lechatchila riber. You think if it's a little empty, it looks like the guy needs parnasa. Right? It's not going to be so successful. A full store attracts customers. Okay.
It's the American way. In Russia, the shelves were always empty, and if there was one item left, you give an asimcha shtetl. But this is America. Here you have to show full.
In Russia, if there was one item on the shelf, it was full. So that's how she do.
Are we going over to Rabbi Avram?
Do you hear me? Can you see me?
We hear you. There was a rumor, not a rumor. I don't want to go through the whole yichus of the story, but somebody was saying that the Rebbitson said, "Et noch sein a großer singer." He's going to be a big singer one day about you.
So first of all, Rabbi Cantor, Shalom Aleichem.
Aleichem Shalom.
Thank you for this distinct honor. I think this is a first to be on the panel with my esteemed brothers. Das ist a chiddush nifla. So thank you for that. So of all my brothers, I happen to have had the schus to not only see the Rebbitson, but to sing for the Rebbitzin. I was a young boy of 4 or 5, And the Mama Aleh Shalom would go visit the Rebbitson in her home. I don't know how that was arranged, but I guess it was done back then. And she would say, "Zing epis," and I would go sing behind the curtain because I was a young little shy boy. So I would sing from behind the curtain. And what I do remember is one time standing outside of 1418 on a sunny day, and she gave me a quarter. Rebbetzin Chana gave me a quarter. Back then, it was a lot of money. And I quickly ran to the toy store. Those who remember Popak's toy store on the corner of Union and Kingston and Union. And I bought a water gun. So unfortunately, I don't have the quarter or the water gun, but I'm sure that I used the water gun to spritz some people, some of my friends, or I got some good spritzes in. So that was a big schus to get a matbeya from Rebbetzin Chana.
So out of Yom Kippur, you're asking forgiveness for spritzing them?
Maybe, I don't remember who it was, but if anybody remembers, Betach Mechila, yeah. I was you mentioned about being a zinger. So I actually verified the story a few hours ago. And the story goes as follows. Rebbetzin Chana was standing outside in front of 1418, speaking to an elder chassid, and a young girl who knew that Rebbetzin comes out from time to time and speaks to people. She would stand by the side and listen in. Some fascinating conversation, and she didn't mind. Rebbetzin Chana didn't mind. So this little girl overhears the following and sees the following. Rebbetzin Chana points with her hand up to the third floor, 1414, to our window, where we lived on apartment 3D, I think it was. And she says, Dorten, and the Friedman Mishpoche, a klein Ingele, when singt sehr schön, singt Heshia Samecho, Mitzrayim Gealtonu. I don't remember the exact lashon, but something to the effect as noch sein a zinger. And this little girl remembers it because it was surprising at the time. That's a broche, werden a zinger. So she remembers to this day that it was an unusual broche, unusual nevuah, that achsidische broche auswachsen a zinger. So all those who ask me, how did it all start? Now you know the rest of the story. This is all Rebbetzin Chana's fault. It's her bracha. It's her nevuah. And the only explanation that I have over the years, later on having a kesher with the Rebbe and notifying him what I'm doing and where I'm singing, what songs I'm singing and the titles, and the Rebbe answering me, I would imagine it's only because, in addition to the fact that I was zoichet to be mahana, to bring hanoah to his mother, so the Rebbe took of his time to answer me and pay attention to me, and so to this day, this is a very humbling experience. This is all, I guess, on a silver platter. But after Hoffenheim is always fit in the shlichus. Gesundheit and Freilichkeit.
No, don't you want to mention that when sometimes you sang from the window when that ever passed by, that would look up?
There were times we knew exactly when the Rebbe was coming. So sometimes I would be my brothers and I would be at the window. We'd knock at the window, or sometimes I'd be downstairs in front of 1414 and sing from downstairs. Rebbetzin Yunik, Olav Sholem, was once interviewed for the Kar Chabad, and I have this cut out and it's hanging in my home. Where Rebbetzin Yunik says that Rebbe used to walk by to go visit his mother when the Ingel Avram Friedman dorten stehen und singen, and the Rebbe would make with his hand to encourage the singing. So these are great schusim, Baruch Hashem.
He would look up at the window and he would see you and he would go like this.
Yeah,
I once sang because you weren't this. I was singing and Rebbe went. Just kidding.
Oh, I missed that. We do know from other chassidim that Rebbetzin Chana would stand outside and listen to our, because Baruch Hashem, from our home, it's like a klungens midas. especially on Shabbos and Yom Tovim. People would come and listen to our Zmiris, and the Rebbitson would stand and have Anoah from the Friedman Mishpacha, led by our father, Olav Shalom, singing Zmiris, Shabbos and Yom Tov. So we had a very special neighbor and a very special schus.
Are there any particular zichrenes that you have regarding, addressed to all the brothers, regarding the Stalkos and living in the same building at that time? The shiva that took place there, if I remember correctly.
Manis, you want to take that?
Yeah, I've heard various versions of the story, but from what I remember at the time, we got a message, Motzei Shabbos. We got a message that the Rebbe wants to know whether the two roofs of the two buildings are connected, because they were going to bring the Rebbitson back to her apartment after she passed away. And the Rebbe said to the attendants, find out whether the roofs are connected, because the Friedmans are kayanim, and they won't be able to be in the house. So we all divided up, and all the boys went different places. And if I'm not mistaken, I ended up sleeping that night in the apartment, a new apartment of couple Bacher, who was still living in New York then before he moved back to South Africa. But that was, I think, the Loshen. Friedmans are kayanim, they won't be able to be in the house if it's an attached roof. And of course it was a single roof. So
Where did the Rebbe sit shiva?
in the house.
So you had any privy to anything because of living in the same house?
Not really. Everything was by Geudel. The Bachrim were let in for the minyanim by Geudel. But I stood outside watching all the different people coming from all the kreisen. Everybody came, everybody was there. Unfortunately, I was there when they took the Rebbitson in the ambulance, and the Rebbe went with her.
That was at the end, after the Fabrengen. Or the Fabrengen was stopped prematurely?
Shabbos afternoon. Dr. Zellickson kept running in, bringing the Rebbe reports, updates.
The next in Shul, Shabbos in Shul, Michael Zellickson was Fabrengen, and he had a lot of stories to share because his father was so involved. One thing he said was als a minig that the Rebbitson used to do on Motzei Shabbos, she would put on all the lights in the house, and she would say, La Yehudim hoysa eira. Motzei Shabbos darf sein lichtig in Stub.
We all have the opposite. The lights are on a whole Shabbos. As soon as Shabbos is over, we turn them all off.
Exactly.
Very good. Thank you very much, the special brothers. I'm glad you're able to spend time together as brothers and in the presence of so many chassidim and anash. And we're going to move on to Rav Yitzchok Raskin. Amen.